In this video, I'll be working through question 1 of the Mathematical Literacy Final Exam of 2024. Question 1.1 states that School X and School Y conducted an election for new members to serve on the school's governing body. The graph below shows the number of voters voting during different time slots at School X and School Y. Now, the bar graph that is given shows the number of voters along the y-axis and the time slots along the x-axis. Now, School X is displayed by the dark shaded bar and School Y is displayed by the bar with a zigzag pattern in it. We have to use this information to answer the questions that follow. In question 111, you have to write down the number of voters that voted at School Y from 1600 hours to 1630. From the graph, we read off that 5 voters voted at School Y between 1600 hours and 1630. In question 112, you have to identify the time slot when 30 people voted at School X. From the graph, we read off that the only time period where 30 people voted was between 1730 and 1800 hours, and this was at School X. So the time slot will be 1730 to 1800 hours. In question 113, you have to choose the statement A to C below that best describes the trend of voters at School Y, where A is, as the time went by, the voter number increased to a maximum and then decreased. B is, the voter number started high, then decreased and picked up again. And C is, the number of voters decreased, then increased and finally decreased with time. Now, option A mentions that the voter number increased to a maximum and then decreased. We can see this trend here, but option A doesn't mention anything about the trend of the start of the voting session. Then we have option B, which does mention that the voter number started high, then decreased and then picked up again. This description tells us about the start and middle of the voting session, but neglects the last 2 hours of the session. This leaves us with option C. The number of voters decreased, then increased, and finally decreased with time. This statement describes the trend of the entire voting session, which makes it the best description of the 3 statements. So the answer is C. In question 114, it is stated that the probability of randomly selecting a voter from School X is 0.56 during the 1730 to 1800 hour time slot. You have to write 0.56 as a simplified fraction. Now 0.56 can be written as 56 over 100. Dividing both the numerator and denominator by the highest common factor of 4 will give us a simplified fraction of 14 over 25. In question 115, you have to calculate the total number of voters at both schools who voted during the 1700 and 1730 time slot. On the graph, during the 1700 and 1730 time slot, the number of voters for School X and Y can be estimated to be 26 voters each. So the total number of voters for both schools during this period will be 52. Question 1.2 states that the newly elected SGB plan to have a lunch with the staff. Table 1 shows the average comparative prices for May 2022 and May 2023 needed for some of the lunch items. Now we are given a list of the food items in the first column. The next 2 columns list the price of the food items in May 2022 and 2023. The last 2 columns list the year-on-year and month-on-month percentage change in food prices. We have to use Table 1 to answer the questions that follow. In question 121, you have to identify the food items that show a decrease in both month-on-month and year-on-year percentage change. Now, the table shows negative and positive values for percentage changes. The positive values indicate an increase in the price of food items, and the negative values indicate a decrease in the price of food items. We can see that there are two food items that decrease in both the month-on-month and year-on-year percentage change. These items are the 750 milliliter sunflower oil and the oranges per kilogram. In question 122, you have to determine the missing value A. A is determined by adding up all the prices for the food items in May 2022. This will give us a total of R298.41. In question 123, you have to calculate the price of a dozen eggs during May 2022. In Table 1, 1,5 dozen eggs cost R52.97 in May 2022. So a dozen eggs will be R52.97 divided by 1,5, and this gives us R35.31. In question 124, you have to write down the unit ratio in the form of 1 to a number for the price of oranges in May 2022 to the price of oranges in May 2023. Now, the price of the oranges in May 2022 is listed as R22.07, and in May 2023 it's listed as R20.10. Since this question mentions May 2022 first, followed by May 2023, we have to write the ratio in that order. This will give us a ratio of 22,07 to 20,10. Now, dividing both sides of this ratio by 22,07 will give us a unit ratio of 1 to 0,91. Question 1.3 states that Table 2 gives definitions of terminology used in mathematical literacy. The table is divided into two columns. The first column lists the letters per definition, and the second column lists the definitions. The definitions for letter A is an increase in the price of a basket of goods or services over time that is representative of the economy as a whole. B is the sum of the values divided by the number of values. C is the income received from the item sold and the cost price of the item is the same. D is the value or values appearing the most in a data set. E is the difference between the highest and the lowest value in a data set. F is an amount paid regularly at a particular rate for the use or loan of money. G is these are the amounts that must be paid every month and which stay the same, like rent, school fees, and transport cost. H is the middle value in an ordered data set. I is the expenses that change over time from 1 week or month to the next, example, telephone and electricity cost. And J is the point where the income exceeds the expenses. We have to use Table 2 to match the definitions with the terminology below. In question 131, we have the term break-even point. The definition that matches this term is J, the point where the income exceeds the expenses. In question 132, we are given the term inflation. The definition of inflation is A, the increase in the price of a basket of goods or services over time that is representative of the economy as a whole. In question 133, we are given the term variable expenses. The definition of variable expenses is I, the expenses that change over time from 1 week or month to the next, example, telephone and electricity cost. In question 134, we are given the term mean. The definition of mean is B, the sum of the values divided by the number of values.